Hi everyone, and welcome to another Aspiricity.com video tutorial. I'm Mike D'Souza, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to use React Bootstrap Card Groups to lay out your Ghost Headless CMS blog. In the last video, we deployed our React blog to an Ubuntu server, and the blog takes its posts from a Ghost Headless CMS via a Node.js app that handles those requests. Before we get started today, I'm just going to head over to the Aspiricity.com website in order to show you what card groups are going to look like. So if we scroll down on the home page, we can see the services section. And this section is made up of a card group with 3 cards, one for consulting, one for training, and one for about us. And each card has an image, a title, a description, and a button. And if we go and look at the blog page, we can see that here, if we scroll down again, we've got a feature blog that's in its own section, but below it is another card group. And in this particular card group, we only have 2 cards, but they're slightly different in that they don't have a button and they're showing a date and an estimated time of how much it'll take for you to read the blog. But what we can also see is that in this view, it's now scaled across the entire screen, just like it did on the previous view, even though it only has 2. And that's because React components in React Bootstrap are responsive, which means that they're going to scale to fit the area that they're in. So if you're viewing this in a desktop computer or a laptop and your browser's got a high resolution on that screen, it's going to fill that screen. And if you're viewing it on a mobile device, as we'll see later in this tutorial, it also will scale. And in fact, it will vertically align the different cards. So we'll see that in a bit, but for now, let's just jump back to the markdown here. So for this video tutorial, we have a few prerequisites. If you've already been following along in this video series and you've completed the first 3 videos in this series, then you have everything you need. But if you haven't done so, you can either do that, or alternatively, if you want a bit faster start, you can watch the first video, which will help you set up Ghost Headless CMS locally. And then you can just go to the Aspiricity.com GitHub site and clone the test node and test React repositories. So let's go take a look at that quickly. So as you can see here, there is a test React and test node, and if you already know how to use Git and everything, it shouldn't be too hard for you to go and clone that code. You can just grab that and then clone it, and then you'll have both repositories. And once you've done that, if you're following this method, then you only have to do a couple of minor changes. You have to create a local env file, which will contain the Ghost Headless CMS credentials so that you can access the Ghost API. And that's described in the repository's readme_integrate.md markdown file. And then you may as well, depending on any changes to dependencies that have occurred over time, have to do an update using npm audit fix after you attempt an npm install. Once you've got everything set up, you are ready to go. Okay, so the first step for us, now that we're ready to go, is we're going to start our Ghost local server, our Node.js server app that's going to handle requests, and as well our React app. So we'll open up a command prompt and we'll cd to the projects directory. I'm just going to do a quick dir, and we can see that we've got Ghost, test node, and test React. So we'll change directories to Ghost, and we're going to do a Ghost start. Okay, so this will start up the Ghost Headless CMS, and then once we've done that, we can again start another command prompt, cd projects, cd test node, and here we can just do a node, and the app is in the index.js, and it just very quickly starts up the Node.js server, and it's handling requests on port 5000, and we can see also that Ghost has also started. And we've got our node.exe file here. Okay, so let's head back to our markdown, and we can see the last thing we need to do is start our React app, and we're going to start that in the integrated terminal here. So we're going to do an npm start, And once that loads, it's going to load in our Chrome browser a localhost 3000 by default. And if we recall back to the previous videos in this series, we'll know that that's not actually going to work because of a CORS issue, which is cross-origin resource sharing. So one thing that browsers do from a security perspective is they prevent or have some rules around how to share resources between different domains. So even though this is all on localhost, because the port numbers are different, it considers it different resources. So unfortunately for localhost, it doesn't work. So how do we get around that? Well, if we come back to our Markdown, basically what we can do is we can start our browser with security disabled. And obviously you would not want to browse with this. So we're going to run another command prompt. We'll just paste that in. We'll hit enter. And we're going to see that we've got our disable web security versions. So as I was saying, definitely don't browse the internet with this, but it's fine for development purposes. And of course, when you actually go to deploy this to your servers, which we did in part 4 and 5 of this video tutorial series, we will handle these issues and set it up so that CORS isn't a problem. Okay, so we can see here when we click on this, it's showing the post. And if we came back to this other one, if I were to click on it, you can see we don't see the post. And that's because there would be a CORS error if I inspected the code. So we can see now with this disable web security that we are getting our posts. And if we click on one of them, we go to the post details page. Okay, so at this point, we have everything we need to get started and actually do adding React Bootstrap to our React blog. Okay, so the first step is to add the React Bootstrap dependency. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to shut off my React blog server, and we're going to do an npm install React Bootstrap, and then we also want Bootstrap. And this will take a second. And while we're doing that, I'm actually going to prepare for the next step, which is adding the Bootstrap CSS import. If we went to the React Bootstrap site and went to the Getting Started / Introduction and information on CSS, we would see that there's a number of different ways to, in fact, import the CSS required for this bootstrapped React. There's dynamic options, etc. So you may want to check those out and just go over to this link and just learn a little bit more about that if you want to choose some other options. But we're just going to do the sort of simplest option for this tutorial, which is importing this bootstrap dist css bootstrap.min.css. And we're going to add that to our index.js file. So let's go do that. Okay, so we just simply need to paste that in, save, and we can close our index.js because we're not going to come back to that. All right. So the next step is we need to create the card group functional component. And the first thing we're going to do that is we're just going to simply create a new folder. We're going to call it components. And I like to do this just simply because I like to keep my pages in sort of the root source, unless there's, domains and subdomains and stuff like that. And then my components that are going to be used by those pages would then go in this components directory. So to save ourselves some time, let's go ahead and copy the blog.js file and we'll put it into the components. And we're going to just basically edit that file and update it in order to make our new card group component. So the first step is we'll just go and rename that, and we'll rename it to card group. And then after that, what we want to do is update the import statements in this new component. So we're going to remove the useState and useEffects and Axios imports and update the app.css import because now it's in a subdirectory and we just need to change the relative path. So let's go in here. We'll remove these guys and we'll update the relative path here and we'll get rid of this Axios. Okay. So now, come back to our markdown here. So we need to rename the actual functional component from blog to card group, and then we're going to add props. And then as well, the next step will be we'll delete the const and effect hook code, so only the return block remains. So let's go do that. So we're going to rename this as card group. And we'll add some props. And we're going to delete everything down to the return block. Okay. So just coming back here, we'll scroll down a bit. So now we're going to delete out everything outside the unordered list tags. And this is because the card group is just going to render the card group itself. And for now, we just want to make it work with the existing code. And then we'll update it with the Bootstrap React components afterwards. So let's just get it working where the rendering portion of the cards, or in this case, the unordered list, is inside this component. So whatever we use to render the list of posts. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to remove everything outside the unordered list tags, and then we're going to need to update the first line for the mapping function. Instead of using data, we're going to use props, because we're going to pass in the post as props from the blog.js file. Okay, so let's go and delete all this stuff, which is going to remain in the blog.js file. All this code here. And we'll just move everything so it looks nice. And now, as we said, we just need to change this to props.post. Okay, and then the last item, we're just going to need to update our export. And we should be done with our card group. So let's save that. Let's come back to here. And if everything we've done is correct, our code should look like this. Okay, so the next step is we need to update the blog.js file in order to call this new card group component. So to do that, we need to import the card group component, and lastly, just replace the unordered list, which we copied into the new card group component, with the actual JSX for the card group. And inside that JSX, we're going to use the data that we get from our Axios request on blog.js and send it in as posts for the props. Okay. So the first step on blog.js is we need to add our import. So we're going to import card group from ./components/card group. And now we'll come down here and replace the unordered list with our card group tag. So we want card group, and we're going to say that we want posts equal to data.posts and just the end tag. So we save that, we'll come back to our markdown, and at this point we should have everything we need to check it again in our browser, and it should display as it was when we started the video tutorial. So let's restart our server, and of course it's going to load up into this other browser, so we'll need to come over here once it's ready. So maybe I'll just scroll down here, get ready for the next section while we're waiting for it. Oh. So yeah, it's going to launch another thing. I'm just going to close that. In fact, I'm going to close the other one here because we don't need it. And so now, if we come back to our localhost and just refresh the main page, and we go to our blog, we can see that we still have our list, but now it's rendering that from the card group component. So we're all set to actually go ahead and update that. So the next step is to update the card group to import React Bootstrap components. So we want to update it to have the card group components that we're going to bring in. And to do that, we actually need to import 3 Bootstrap card components: card, container, and card deck. So we're actually going to create our own card component, functional components. So we need to rename the card as Bootstrap card. And then we're going to use card deck, which is similar to Bootstrap's React's card group, but it actually has a nice little sort of margin between each of the cards, which I just think looks a little nicer, but you may want to use card group or try either one. And then finally, there's container, which is the main sort of flex box that you will put your React Bootstrap card group component inside of, or any React Bootstrap components. And it just provides, by default, some nice padding on the sides that sort of like, gives that effect where it pushes the content into the middle of the page. But as well, it provides a lot of CSS and styling for all the other components. So typically you're going to want to put your components inside of a container component. And then that's all coming from the React Bootstrap dependency. So let's go do that. Let's come over to card group. And we're going to do our import. And we want card as Bootstrap card, comma, and then card deck and container. And that is from React Bootstrap. Okay. Scroll down. So now that we've got our imports, as mentioned, we're going to create our new card functional component. And the point of the card functional component is it's going to be the component that renders each individual card within the group. So first, we're actually going to take our props and put them into some consts. So for example, we're taking props.data.title and just putting it into title, and that just makes it a little easier for us to use them in the code. So let's go and do that. So first, we're going to go const card equals, and this will also take props. And then our arrow function, or ES6 arrow function. And now const title equals props dot data dot title. We'll do one for our excerpt, which will be our description. And then we need one for the image. And this one's not exactly the same name. It's actually feature image in the data. So feature underscore image. And again, you could use Postman or whatever to look at the data that's coming back, or you could even inspect the web page. I just happen to know offhand that that the values that we need within the data that's coming back from Ghost are title, excerpt, feature image, and the last one we need is the ID of the post. Okay, so let's go back to our README. The next step here is that we actually need to create the return block that will have our render function, that will render the actual Bootstrap card. So, and again, it's going to render a single card for each blog post that we send in. So the first step is just to create the parent Bootstrap card. So we go return, open bracket, and Bootstrap card. And we'll just come back quickly. So inside the card, and by the way, so there's a number of child elements that we're going to do, and you can check that out on React Bootstrap GitHub.io, components cards. The first one we're going to do is the image tag, followed by the body tag, and then we're going to put a title and a text tag inside of those. And we'll come back for the title part, but we'll do the first two. So inside here, we're going to do bootstrap card.image, and we're actually going to specify a prop called variant, and we're going to use top, which basically tells it to put it at the top of the card. And then we need a source, and that equals the image value. And lastly, we want an alt, and that's going to be our title. And then we can close this off with a close tag. And the next thing we need is a bootstrap card body. And it's in here that we're going to put our title and description, but let's go back to our markdown. Okay, so now we need to create our title, and we're going to put our link to, and inside of that title, because we actually want it to link to the post details page, we're going to put this link to here. So if you recall, we actually had that in our list items before, so it's basically the exact same thing that we had there. So let's come back to our card group, and we'll create our bootstrap card title. And here, we just need to do a link to, and that equals, and inside the curly braces here, we actually want to use the backtick string, because we want to be able to create our blog post, but then we want to determine or use the value of the ID. And so that backtick allows us to basically like get the value of that. And actually we need a $sign first. So $sign and then ID. So yeah, this allows us to pass this string and create a string dynamically with this ID variable. So we're all set with that. We get a closing bracket for our link. And then inside here, we need our title data. Okay, so that's our bootstrap title. We're all set with that. And next, we need our bootstrap card. And now the last thing we need to have here is our description. So that's going to go in a text tag, and that's going to use the excerpt. Okay. So we are all set with our card group at this point. Or sorry, our card component. We actually need to still update our card group. So let's go and do that. But first we'll head back to the markdown. So as mentioned, our card functional component looks as follows. We should have everything here. If it looks like that, then you're all set. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is actually update the card group functional component to use the card. So to do that, we're actually going to replace the unordered list tags with a Bootstrap React container tag. And again, if you want to learn more about the container tag, you can go to the React Bootstrap site and then layout and grid. And then within the container tag, we're actually going to use the card deck component. And again, you can go check that out on the layout grid. And as well, if you need more information about how to create responsive websites, you can check out this W3 Schools HTML responsive link. So I recommend you definitely check that out if you're just learning about how to create responsive websites. So let's go ahead and create or update our return block with container and card deck. So we'll come down, and we're going to change our unordered list to container. And inside the container, we're going to have a card deck. And now let's copy these two, come down here, and replace this guy. And we'll just fix that. Okay, let's head back. We'll scroll down. So the next step is we need to update the mapping function that occurs within the card group, because right now it's pointing to a list item tag, and we need it to render the card. So one thing just to remember is that because this is a mapping function, we want to have this key, and we're going to set it equal to the post ID. So let's go and do that. So actually, we already have this key right here, so I'm just going to copy that. And now we have our /card, and then we're sending in the props, and that should be, I believe, post. But let me just check. Oh, data. And we're sending post. And then lastly, we need our key. And then we're all set. So this should provide us with everything we need to render this as a card. Oop. Try saving, there we go. And at this point, we should actually be ready to go. But we'll come back to our markdown, but just to make sure there's nothing else. Yeah, so your card group should look like that. If everything looks like this, you should be good to go. And the next thing is we're ready to check this out in our browser. So let's go and do that. So we can see here that we've got our image, we've got our title tag with link, but in fact our text is, because it's white, is basically not showing up. And this is due to the Create React App CSS. So we need to fix that. And as well, we've got a bit of an issue here where we can see that, it's got 7 posts and they're all going across. So it is working responsively, but obviously we've got a single word on each row here, and that's not really what we're wanting. So we'll need to fix that up as well. But before we do that, let's just go and inspect this. And we can see, because I've actually got it set to a pixel 2 rendering, that this page already is giving us the responsive behavior we want. So we've pretty much got that for free. So, that's great, right? So let's close that. Let's scroll back up here, and then we'll head back to our markdown. Okay. So at this point, we're ready just to do some final cleanup. We've got our card groups working, but we need to disable the Create React App CSS just to make it look a little bit better. And obviously, we probably want to style this with our own CSS, but we'll look at that potentially at a future tutorial. But yeah, obviously today we're just going to get the rudimentary layout set up, and we can look at CSS hopefully in another video. So the easiest way to just fix this is we're going to remove this header tag that occurs on the blog.js file. So we're going to change our return block to look like this. So let's go do that. Come over to blog. We're just going to remove the header tag here, and we'll move it down here. And we'll just move everything over to make it look a little nicer. And we'll save. And if we come back, voila. We've removed that sort of dark background, and the text that's white is now black, and everything's looking pretty good from a at least readability of the excerpt text here. So the next step we want to do is actually change this to have just 3 posts rather than the 7 that we've got now. Okay, so if we come back to our markdown, we scroll down. So to do this, we want to set it to 3 posts. And really this can all be done on a single a line of code. And we have to update our map as well. So what we're going to do here, and I'm just going to explain this, is we're actually going to use something known as the spread operator. And what the spread operator does is it takes a object that has nested objects and expands it into a list of those objects. And then we can surround that with an array to basically create an array of these objects. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to slice that array and take the 0 to 3rd elements. So we're basically going to take 3 elements. And we're going to assign that all to a post variable, and then we'll update our map to use the posts. So let's go do that. So we come back in here. We need to add a const posts. I'm going to equal to the spread operator and props dot posts. And then we're just going to slice that and take 3 elements. And now we just need to update this to posts. Click save, come over here, and there we have it. We've now reduced that to 3. And obviously, if we wanted all 7, we could do something a little bit more robust and create a grid that perhaps was like a number of card rows with 3 cards to each row. And in fact, that's what we've implemented on the Aspiricity.com site. You just can't see it yet because we don't have enough blog posts yet. But hopefully with this video and a few more items, we should have that running fairly soon. Okay, so let's come back, go back to our markdown, and we'll scroll down here. Okay, so what are some further enhancements? Well, as mentioned, we can create multiple rows to be able to display all of our blog posts. We can implement a grid that maps, for example, each group with 3 rows and then renders each card in the row using a second map. So we're basically going to have a map that maps the card rows, and then within each card row, we're going to map the card group. So next, the other one that we can do is obviously do styling on the page. Right now, if we look at that page, it's basically got some pretty basic link styling, good old blue with an underline, and we haven't really styled the text at all, and we still got styling using React Create app for our link. So obviously updating our styling would be one of the next steps. And finally, another thing that we can do is use next-gen images. So if you're using like Google Analytics or something like that, and you want to get a high score on your SEO, then doing something like next-gen images is really important. And I recommend heading over to this blog post, how to set up next-gen images for React hosted on, well, in this case, Amazon S3, but it really will apply to any hosting environment. So finally, the code for this is available on our GitHub site at github/Aspiricity. And I just want to say thank you for everyone that has watched this video. If it was useful for you, please hit like. If you're interested in more videos like this, subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments, even if you want to suggest something for me to do in a future video, I would love to hear your comments. So please go ahead and do that. Thanks.